everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today, we're talking to Sohrab Hosseini, who is the CEO at Orc AI, which is an AI engineering and LM ops platform. Greetings, Sohrab.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So we always kick things off by asking for some predictions about the AI market as a whole. I know people love making predictions in AI, but I think it's an interesting way to kind of kick things off and kind of learn more from the leaders in the industry. So we start off by asking you how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time and in 15 years' time?
Good one. So 5 years, definitely it would be kind of the relationships now managers have with people reporting directly to them, right? Where an individual is then managing and orchestrating a group or swarm of agents. That will be the case in 5 years. In 15 years, I think that the whole interface will be dissolved, and things I cannot even imagine how we're interfacing with the agents will look like. Probably a lot of it will be abstracted away.
Do you think, because it's interesting the way that you talk about people kind of managing agents, do you think some of the kind of management skills that people learn now would be useful for that, or is it going to be a totally different type of management?
It's different because when you're dealing with other people, you have, of course, attitudes, behaviors, emotions that you're dealing with.
Motivations,
incentives, and a lot of those things, I would guess, don't exist within the agents, right? So the variability in behavior and emotions will be less. Of course, there's going to be other things that then do need to be solved for. Good question. I know it will be. I just don't know what it will be. Right, the downsides of managing agents versus humans.
Yeah. Okay. And the second question is the AGI one. I'll let you put your kind of own definition on that. I saw a report the other day. I think AI 2027. That this report was creating a bit of a stir and was basically giving us a timeline of kind of 2027, 2028. Where we would get to that kind of super intelligence, if you like. I mean, do you think we're that close or still further away?
Well, I would say super intelligence on specific niches will be there. General intelligence, I don't know if the current LLM technology and architectures are gonna get us there, or it will plateau, right? Because if it will plateau, you really need another paradigm, which still needs to come up, that will get us to the next hurdle for AGI.
Okay,
so you don't with LLMs, specific super intelligence, I'm sure you can get to, but the general intelligence, maybe the LLMs are not the architecture for.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you see as the future in terms of AI and the global economy? Do you think we're going to get more wealth inequality or kind of narrower gaps in opportunity?
Well, if we just continue as we're configured as a society, and we just add AI to it, it will be a huge haves and have-nots gap and differences. So it will require some re-engineering and rethinking of us as a society. Unfortunately, what I think is this societal changes, governmental changes, laws and regulations work on a much slower cadence than the AI innovation. So it will the discrepancy is tricky and dangerous, I believe.
And do you think, I think people have different views on whether there is going to be kind of mass job loss or whether there'll be new jobs created that we don't even necessarily know what they are right now. Do you think there'll always kind of be a place for humans in that economy moving forward?
With all other innovations, it was you could see why new jobs will be created. While some jobs disappear, more new jobs will reappear. AI is one of the first waves where I believe if that logic actually holds up, right? Because there's just a lot of bullshit jobs, right?
Yeah.
That we really don't need. And then yeah, everyone going into creative jobs and business is fine, but there's not that many amazingly creative people out there, right? The ones that are creative intrinsically would be doing it already. I'm like literally we're now in some like fundraising mode and due diligence mode, etc. And so I'm now dealing with bookkeepers, accountants, notaries, lawyers, and there's so much stuff that I'm burdened with. I'm like, we just literally brought this up on ourselves to do this type of work where I have to like get the KYC from here and then the 7 KYC there and move this paper around and send it to this person. It's like all this is really not needed. All these roles are actually more of a burden or a tax on society. Even though everyone's working hard, right? And they all have the best intentions, but
Yeah.
macro, like, are they actually creating value or is it just the tax we're paying as a society?
I was reading about notaries in
Mm.
the kind of European startup
Germany is
world, or
famous. Yeah.
funding what, yeah, in Germany particularly. And I think that'd be quite an alien concept to a lot of US listeners. Do you want to just explain a bit what that is? I mean, we're a bit off
Yeah, so
topic here, but it's quite
because we're
interesting. So
not based in Germany, but I know for sure indeed in Germany, if you have to go through a notary for for shares or any changes you have, then you physically have to be present at the notary office, and they have to read all the documents in German in person, right? So that can literally take hours where you're sitting there as a non-German speaker listening to some German notary, and then you sign, and then that's done. So yeah, it's those type of roles that you're like, what are we doing, right?
and that's a law, whereas obviously in the US it's a a DocuSign click of a
Yeah.
button basically. So yeah, just one
Sign on the dotted
example of the
lines.
differences in the startup ecosystem there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so just in terms of the AI industry, it loves a hot piece of news. What's caught your eye over the last couple of weeks? Like what's got you excited?
Well, surprise was this whole windsurf
Hmm.
trilogy that happened over the weekend from a Friday to a Sunday. So that was interesting to follow. Like, is this really happening or is this just some hype? But what is really interesting is Cloud Code came out. Was it like 8 weeks ago or a bit more? And you didn't really hear anyone talk about it. And my co-founder Tony, CTO, um, was a very early adopter, and he's like, "This is really, really good, but why is there no one talking about it? Like, it's not going viral. You don't see it in the communities. It's not trending on X, in the AI communities. Um, Everyone's still about Cursor, but funny enough, like the last 3 weeks, you do see like because it's so superior how much now everyone and all the communities are talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting seeing like why is it so quiet around it, and then all of a sudden it's now taking off and everyone is talking about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, definitely hearing a lot of people talking about that. I suppose it's one of those things where there's so many tools available, it takes a little while for people to kind of move and try something different. And then when they do, it starts to kind of spread and
And
the
also
word
because
gets out there.
the interface of it is different, right? With the terminal and how you should hook things up properly, so it really, really works. So probably teams also just needed to get comfortable in the new uh, way of using it.
Yeah, okay. So before we jump into Orc, just wonder if you could give us a quick intro into your background and growing up. Particularly interested in what McKinsey taught you about building an AI startup.
Short answer, not much, but yeah, well, a little replays. So born in Iran, 40 years old now. So 40 years ago, born in Iran in the middle of the Iran-Iraq war. And at the age of 5, my parents were smart enough to pack our bags, and we moved to the Netherlands. So we arrived here as refugees in 1990. January 1st, I still remember the fireworks on the ground of
Okay.
the night before. And so grew up in the Netherlands, computer science background, and actually have always been in startups. So at the age of 19, started my first startup, sold that after a year. Then my second, I sold that one successfully. Third one was 2008 by then. So in the big crisis, I
Hmm.
also went bankrupt there. Took me quite some time to recover from that bankruptcy. And ever since, I've been in different COO, CTO roles in scale-ups. And after my MBA, did join McKinsey indeed in the digital role. So I was one of the first associates doing digital transformations. Learned a lot in the 2.5 years. I worked in all kinds of countries on why enterprises get in their own way and what is really needed to make transformations happen there. That's really lessons I'm benefiting now as we're doing AI transformations in the enterprises and what is needed to get there. After McKinsey, joined a large transportation company where I managed the autonomous routing, autonomous driving departments. And after that is where I met my co-founder, Tony. We came up with the idea for Orc, quit our jobs and started building 3 years ago now.
Yeah. So do you want to kick things off by talking about the core problem that you're solving with Orc?
Yeah, sure. So of course the world is now filled with tooling for building with Gen AI and LLMs. Approach we took is really an end-to-end approach where we believe teams that are building really need lifecycle management in developing a hypothesis on what are we going to build with generative AI, doing that at scale with mass experimentation, deploying it in production where we actually run the workloads, right? So we take great pride in running the workloads and then having full observability, monitoring, and evaluations on the workloads. Now, and here it's two different personas that we also try to bring together is the hardcore techies, right? So the engineers, data scientists, data engineers have great APIs and SDKs to build with, while the less technical colleagues that all need to be involved as well, product managers, domain experts, compliance officers, have the right UI and AI studios to be collaborating. And because the entire process happens in one platform, you have your data unified, you don't have this fragmentation of different stuff and different tools. And management and leadership knows, hey, our people are enabled to move fast, but we know it's happening in one safe and secure environment, and we don't have all this shadow IT popping up everywhere because everyone wants to move fast and they don't want to go through the normal processes.
So that collaboration point is kind of one of the key aspects to it, I guess, is bringing the kind of non-technical users and the developers together, and they have completely different views of the platform, do they?
Yeah, and of course you have a spectrum, right, with different shades of how technical, non-technical people are, because what we actually see is after a while, the more tinkering types and the more hacky types that are maybe not technical do pick up prompt engineering. They do pick up like, hey, I can do this with the models, and if I change this, the model will behave different. So teams are actually happy to then give some power to whoever takes prompt engineering, right? Can be someone from the business side, someone from the product organization. But indeed, in general, if you would like really divide the roles, is the engineers are building and hooking up all the different pipelines and APIs, while the product team and the domain experts are testing the hypotheses, improving the evaluators, building custom evals, and then doing the annotations, human in the loop reviews, etc. So that then the engineering team again can, with all that feedback, improve what is happening in production. And there's so many industries where the engineers are not the domain experts, right? And education, in healthcare, in fintech, in legal roles is where you really need someone else to tell you what's right or wrong.
And how do you see the roles of those non-developers changing, like the product managers, the domain experts, as AI apps and their development become more mainstream in companies?
Yeah, so it slowly is evolving into that earlier question you asked about 5 years from now, right? So they become the agent orchestrators. We even see that already with all our engineers in-house, right? Like everyone needs to use Cloud Code first in our engineering team. So our engineers are slowly becoming agent orchestrators, where they have multiple terminals running, and they're just checking if architecture is respected, the agents do the right things, they don't break the code base. But they're not that much coding away. I believe that's going to be in more and more roles the case, where everyone is just managing a group of agents running around.
And you mentioned obviously that there's a lot of tools kind of out there at the moment and orchestration tools. Like what did you see kind of missing from those that can convinced you of this direction with Orc?
Yeah, one is being outside of the critical path, right? So you telling what happened in production afterwards. We want to be in the critical path and running your workloads. Why? Because that allows us to help you with auto scaling and retries and fallbacks and all kinds of um, DevOps capabilities you need to run at scale in production, right? So we can remove that burden from the team by doing that. And the other one is really this collaboration, right? A lot of the our colleagues from other companies, they really focus on the engineers only, right? So
Hmm.
it's very, how would you call it? Um, for the less technical people, it looks so frightening, right? Like, oh,
Yep.
this is dark mode, JSONs everywhere, and code everywhere. And they're like, oh, maybe I'm not comfortable using this tool. So really finding this fine line between what the technical people need and what you put in front of them, right? Because they will log out and is if all these low code, no code building and drag and drop stuff, they want to be doing things in code, but you also don't want to scare off the colleagues on the other side. So it's a thin line to walk UX wise. And
Yeah.
that would be the third thing is where we take really a big pride and joy in is building beautiful business apps and not just a dark mode with a lot of JSONs in your face.
Yeah, and I guess like, when you're trying to do that kind of end-to-end and collaborative platform, the UX becomes like one of the most important parts of it, right?
It's really one of the value adds because we're abstracting away a lot of the complexity that normally teams have to go and patch together and maintain. Then how do you simplify then also the interface with all these components?
And you mentioned you're kind of a few years in from when you initially met your co-founder and first started coming up with the ideas. And obviously, any startup evolves when they're kind of trying to find product market fit or pivoting, the strategy. Was there like a specific customer use case which really shifted your thinking and thought this is the right direction we need to go for?
Yeah, so early on, our design partners, where the tooling we were building was a lot focused around configuration management and managing configurations. But funny enough, they started misusing the configurations to do prompt management and prompt engineering, right? So that
Okay.
was like one of the first seeds that were planted. Like, oh, this also, of course, these prompts need to be version controlled and managed and have a life cycle. It was simply coming from the world of configs, which basically a prompt is, right? It's just another type of configuration you need to maintain. And because that's how we communicate with the models.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, there's a huge number of open source frameworks available. What are the pros and cons between a company, kind of tying together like various different tools from an open source perspective, or having, one kind of built-in platform like you can offer?
Well, it can be a every organization will have its own philosophy, its own architectural guidelines and what they do and don't do. And what we see now, because it's moving so fast, right? A lot of these open source libraries are not that stable yet. Or they change so fast that they also keep breaking your production workloads because a new update came out and now you have to redo all your work, right? So it sounds cool to begin with, but then really in production it's going to start slowing you down because you're now in production and boom, the library updated and all of a sudden some stuff that was running stable is now broken. So we see that happening. Second is as you're patching more and more libraries together. Now, good luck keeping that as an integrated whole. Or you're literally going to spend 1 to 2 FTE just maintaining your enablement. In our case, we immediately give you back that capacity because we're running your enablement platform for you. So if there is anything wrong, you can just point at us and blame us. And I mean, for now, we're like at 99.999% uptime. So there's already a burden less for you to think of, especially because one thing organizations don't have enough of is AI engineers that already totally understand the whole landscape and everything
Hmm.
that they need to do. So the few people you are able to get on board and maintain, You want them to be building your differentiators, right, and not maintaining all this boilerplate and scaffolding under the hood. So we release those engineers so they can focus on your strategic differentiators.
And you mentioned that companies, kind of have different challenges and there are different levels of kind of AI and ML skills, like within the business. Like, where are you kind of pitching the org solution?
Yeah, so if medium-sized organizations is almost always the CPO, CTO, and then if it's a larger enterprises, a lot of time we end up at now organizations setting up these centers of excellence, right, where they're trying to group people, process, and technology in a central hub that then in a hub and spoke way services multiple business units, right? So the people are grouped and based on budget and capacity, they get allocated, but then they go back into the pool, the central pool. So there, it's a lot of times the leader, whether it's the VP of or head of that center of excellence, is where we then talk with. And that's very interesting with these COEs, is because they really have a collaboration problem, right? Where multiple big enterprises, where this central team is servicing multiple business teams. They all have their own backlogs and priorities and urgencies, and different countries with different needs and different data residency, data privacy needs. So now you have tens of life cycles you're managing. The business teams constantly have new ideas, a new model comes out, so they all start calling the central team saying, hey, what if I upgrade to the new Gemini model? Can you test that for me, please? The new Anthropic is out, can you upgrade me? So the central team is going crazy because until org, they were literally doing Google Sheets and Excel sheets and Slack messages going back and forward to collaborate.
Yeah, like managing that different life cycle. But you can kind of, so for example, for like one COE that's managing like, 10 or 20 different kind of business units, you can manage all of those different collaborations within the one platform.
First of all, because you have the project management and project folders and structures with role-based access control. So which business unit is allowed to access which project, and then what can they actually make changes, or they can just do reviews and annotations. So it just smoothens the collaboration, and you give some power back to the business units, because now literally someone from a business unit can start testing a new model, right? They can run an experiment and a regression test with their own evals to see if the new Gemini model actually works before they even have to go and get capacity from the central team. They are enabled and empowered to test their ideas quickly without always being blocked behind the engineers and their capacity.
So it kind of, it's an accelerator and a booster for the kind of skills that you do have within the business.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, obviously, your kind of European HQ company. Like, how does that shape how you're thinking about privacy, compliance, customer expectations? How do you think that would be different if you were a kind of US-centered company?
So because we're indeed European born, everything we did from day one was with all this in place. But the US, you see, even on state level, they're now all putting up or adding laws and regulations, right? Even with the GDPR, the different states have implemented in their own way. And now with the AI Act, they're all also thinking and implementing their own ways. So it's just going to come. And because we're born and built from day one with that into consideration, we're actually not that worried. It's kind of what we live and breathe, it's ingrained in the architecture.
And in terms of the ROI question, like when it comes to building kind of AI apps in companies, do you think the market underestimates the complexity of actually running successful AI applications in production?
Yeah, because they all follow the hype, right? And they think the LinkedIn feeds are all representing reality, and the whole world is changing because you put up an N8N workflow live somewhere. And at the same time, sometimes there's underinvestment because there's so much more value you can get out of it, and sometimes there's overinvestment. We were speaking with one of our prospects recently. They built one use case in ecom, to help you with shopping and recommendations. It worked really, really well, right? So the feature-wise, it was perfect. But then they did their maths afterwards, and turned out it's going to cost us $500 million a year in OpenAI tokens,
Okay.
in dollars, but tokens spent just to run this one feature. And this is literally just one button somewhere on the platform. Now imagine we turn on many more features. If only half of our users once a month would use this feature, and the entire revenue was like $750 million, right? So um, these ROI discussions are not happening enough. Also with time saved. So you see teams that are putting up these data analyst agents that help you, but no one is measuring how much time is being saved by this. Because sometimes it will actually give you a good story to ask for more budget and more prio, but sometimes you're literally destroying value because you're running a negative margin on whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it might just be quicker to do it in another way.
Yeah, and that's actually a cool thing we're investing heavily on in Q3. Is you have all these, you have the costs inside, of course, not only for your LLM usage, but some of these external APIs and external tools that the the agents are calling cost money, right? If you, I don't know, do a call to Apollo IO to get some email address, it has some cost associated to it. It's not for free. So you have the whole cost base of your agent running per lifetime, per life cycle, per month. But what is the value it's generating, right? So you can literally attribute a value to it because of time saved or because a conversion happened, right? Every team will have its own assumptions of what is value. Now, the couple of successful moments of this agent also need to cover all the unsuccessful attempts, right? So
Hmm.
you kind of literally can create a PNL of an endpoint or an agent running, so that the product manager, who actually should act as a mini CEO, right, on top of their own
Yeah.
product that they're responsible for, can literally show a P&L of the agent, and the team can intervene and make decisions based on the margins and how it is running.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and that's a feature I haven't heard like from any other companies, and I think really kind of plays into that theme of how companies get ROI out of these tools, because there's so many sub niches within AI development, like the safety and governance and all these things, but expense management is not one I've heard yet. Like when it
Yeah,
comes
and these
into
agents
like
kind of
AI
will get
development.
a budget, right, to go and spend. So you need to block that, and you need to have a P&L to account for at the end of the month at least.
And a lot is talked about kind of fine tuning of models and different model choice, but is workflow design, as important or more important than which model you're using?
Oh, good one. If it's more important. Well, I mean, it's the first step to take anyway, right? And even sometimes rethinking the process, because literally mapping whatever the current process is to an N8N workflow, right? That's one thing, but maybe the whole process need to be re-engineered, and that's where only a few people are really good at, right? People are very good at creating complexity and a mess. Not that many people are good in creating order and structure and clear thinking. But you need those type of people to, first of all, rethink the process.
Hmm.
What of this was never needed to begin with, and we map it to the new one, like the German notaries, right? Like, is it really needed that someone reads out a German contract the whole day in the age of agents and LLMs everywhere, right? Does
Yeah.
a human need to read it out for me? um, Instead of just automating that, where you now have a German AI agent speaking to you for 8 hours,
Just for the
you
sake
can
of it. Yeah.
skip that, right? So the re-engineering requires problem solving, smart people to really crack that. And then picking the model is part of the process, but these models are changing and being updated so much. You actually need to see, how do we set this new process up for constant change? Because that's the only constant is, models are going to change, the capabilities are going to change. Some will actually have a regression, and we need to switch to another one. Um, so how do we reduce our cost of experimentation and our cost of change?
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose it kind of ties into the next question. Like you mentioned, you've been in startups like your whole career. Like, how do you see building an AI startup as different to the previous ones that you worked in, and what lessons did you learn in other startups that still hold today?
Well, what definitely after the bankruptcy, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and it took me also an MBA after that to really learn it, is cash management and financial management, and how you properly do that so you don't run out of oxygen in the middle of the run.
Hmm.
What is really different for an AI startup like ours versus, you know, an HR SaaS company, just to name an example, is first of all, you can't sleep because there's always something happening and changing that you need to be aware of. So the constant flood of changes, and that's actually the planning challenge. So of course we do quarterly plannings and we have our own moonshots and where we want to be, but it's really hard because it's like, where do we shoot towards, right? So that when we land there, it's
Hmm.
still a relevant capability and a feature to have, right? And you kind of don't miss your landing zone
Hmm.
of where you really want to be. So you really have to consider of, okay, assuming some of these changes, which things are not going to be needed in 6 months, so let's not invest in those. What is going to be needed, so let's start building it so we're there the moment it's needed to remain relevant, right? So it's on very short iteration cycles, constantly knowing where do I need to shoot so that we land on the right spot in the right time. That's very challenging versus other industries where you just have a bit more time to execute on your roadmap and plans.
And how do you think about that? And how do you make those decisions? Because I guess that's the job of any entrepreneur, right? Is to kind of predict a market and say,
Uh,
we think this is going to be sort of relevant for that. But when things are changing so fast, that makes it sort of X amount times harder. So I just wonder, what's the thought process like? How do you make those decisions? Is it kind of just reading lots and gut feel, or is there anything kind of
yeah,
else that you put into that?
yeah, because all the information trickles to you in, GitHub posts, GitHub libraries and posts and X, etc. But so, what is the line to read between all these little snippets of input and info? What is noise? What is signal, of course, in there? Um, and where do we bet on? And you will always make some bad bets as well, right? And then we're comfortable killing our darlings, right? Just stopping a project midway because we're like, this is not going to be relevant anymore in 2 months. So let's just consider it sunk cost and move on. Um, and having a team that is agile enough that we're like, okay, guys, this is now all of a sudden the direction we need to go. And we don't want to be people dragging their feet and heels every time we change direction because that's, again, a given, right? Um, so it's also how you set up your processes and your people. And my co-founder and me are like twice, 3 times a week in long product calls on
Yeah,
what
I
are we
bet.
doing,
Yeah.
what should we be doing, how should we read this new trend or new technology or new thinking, and how do we incorporate that?
And like when it comes to like the go-to-market playbook, is that any different for kind of an early stage AI company to a SaaS company, or are there kind of similar lessons that you can approach for both?
Good one. I think it's funny. The biggest problem in go-to-market is not almost never the technology, right? Like writing the code and shipping the code and running it is one thing. Is really the people, right? The change management. So, and I'm sure, again, I think also in other SaaS companies they have the same challenge of educating your market
Hmm.
and um, evangelizing, right? We have that challenge, but I'm sure other companies for sure have it, right? I really learned that in my McKinsey time on changing the people and the processes is actually the hard part in tech. It's almost never like throwing some technology over the fence. It's people and process. For us, I think that's almost the same with other industries.
And has anything changed in terms of your strategy for go-to-market as you've learned more about that kind of adoption process for AI in enterprise companies?
Um, because we're of course in a hot topic, right? And everyone wants to meet you, right? Everyone will free up time. We're not like at the um, I don't know, the 800 HR tech performance review platform, right? So it's relatively easy to get calls booked and meetings booked, but a lot of times it's actually for them to educate themselves by speaking to a vendor. So learning to read between the lines from our account execs and myself, and also disqualify quickly, so you're not wasting your time chasing a logo that is just trying to learn from you, but they're not actually really serious, right? They just
Hmm.
on a date with you for the food, not so much because they want to settle with you. Yeah, that's a hard lesson. Uh, yeah.
And how do you think about the kind of sales-led growth, product-led growth? Obviously you've got that more sort of techie developer side to your business, but then also the non-developer side. Which direction are you coming at that, or is it both?
Um, it's more the sales-led growth. Why? Because we're such a horizontal end-to-end platform. You need a somewhat of a top-down push, right? Now, individual engineers gonna be or you will have some outliers, but it's not going to be pushing that internally. Like, oh, we need an end-to-end platform, and I found it. So you need some strong leaders that are like, hey guys, let's stop messing around with all these trending libraries and the next
Okay, yeah.
hot thing on GitHub, and set proper tools end-to-end in place. And have a partner that manages that, instead of us having to patch things together and then the guy who built it leaves, and who's going to manage it now. But so it's really sales-led growth, but we of course have a PLG motion. Why? Engineers hate and don't want to talk to sales, right? They
Hmm.
just want to see the product, read the API docs, and then make a judgment. So for those decision makers and stakeholders that are also involved in deals, we have those channels open, so they also can see the platform and form their opinion as part of the decision making.
And you've got some partnerships. Like, did I see a partnership with Grok as like a company that you're working with? Is that right? Are there any other sort of major partnerships that you're pursuing?
Yeah, so with all the model providers, we have some sort of partnership, and also the hyperscalers. Actually, the great partnerships we have is with the AI boutiques, right? So
Okay.
very specialized, highly specialized AI boutiques. So
Hmm.
not the typical software outsourcing company that now also does AI, but really legit AI boutiques that are now flooded with demand, which they cannot uh, satisfy. So
Yeah.
they're like, okay, I don't want to say no to these prospects coming in, but there's so many people I have that can do the good quality work we want to do. So with them, we team up where they will bring us in. Already removes a lot of custom development and work that they need to do, and then they go for the client and implement on top of org the actual use cases, right?
Hmm.
So they free up their engineers so they can service more clients, instead of losing the deal to someone else because of lack of capacity. And there we get both great clients from, but also great stickiness, because the platform is implemented properly, how it should be in the change management part.
Okay, and last question, like if I could send you back 3 years, like you mentioned, you're always kind of in a process of placing bets, and like you place good ones and bad ones. Which is the kind of one bet that you would change if you could do anything in like the last 3 years?
Yeah, so for the last month, banging my head on this one, easy to answer. Starting in the US versus starting in Europe and in the Netherlands, right? An AI company like this, um, it's only easy to speak afterwards, but I'm sure a lot of things would have been a bit easier than trying to build this from Europe.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. That was an interesting question. I was wondering whether that was kind of part of the plan, that you wanted to kind of dominate like the home territory and then move to the US, but you feel it would have been better to have been based there and kind of perhaps move to Europe at a later date.
Yeah, because when you say dominate, right, then it kind of there's already the assumption like both markets have the same maturity, so you
Hmm.
can sell here and you can sell there. It's just that the maturity levels are so different, where it just takes
Yeah,
us so
okay,
much more
understand.
time to get to get the right maturity level of clients that understand the problem we're solving, right? We're not the good platform for teams that are just starting out. we're for the teams that have had a couple of projects, they have had some bloody noses and lessons learned, and now like, okay, this is the painkiller, right? It's not like a vitamin pill. You don't want to be the vitamin pill, but the painkiller. So in the US, because the maturity levels are this, and another cultural aspect that I've learned the hard way, Europe has the tendency of building things in-house, right? So I don't know, because of the comfort or lack of time pressure, is, oh, well, let's build it in-house. We have these engineers sitting here, so have them now build our own Gen AI platform, right? And let's mess around for a couple of years and then have a failed IT project and then call a big vendor to come in and still do it for us, right? Well, in the US, you see that the default is like, guys, how can we get this in as soon as possible so we can go back to business and building what we need to build, right? Instead of just rebuilding stuff for the sake of telling management we rebuilt the wheel for you, right?
Yeah, and not
so
getting
it's that
fired.
mentality is also really weird. Of here, people take pride in just building stuff just to show off instead of, are we creating value really?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been great having you on today, Sohrab. If people want to get in touch, whereabouts do you live? Are you on LinkedIn most of the time, or X, or email? Like, where's the best way to get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn, definitely, I'm always there. Email is sohrab@org.ai, easy. And what was the other question? Oh, yeah, in Amsterdam. So whoever is around and wants to get in touch and go for a drink in the city center on the canals, hit me up.
Great stuff. Well, thanks for your time, and thank you to everybody watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.